Hello, and welcome to episode 105 of Design Curious Podcast. I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. Today on the podcast, we are talking about initial consultations, or even just the beginning of a project where you're gathering information and what kind of questions you should be asking your prospective client about themselves and about the project to make sure you have a full understanding of what you are going to be doing for them as a designer, so that everyone's going into this project with eyes wide open as far as expectations, as far as style, as far as design direction. So I'll get into all of that in the episode. I want to remind you that you can work with me directly one-on-one in My Design Mentor, which is my online mentoring platform. We can tailor it to your needs as you're starting out your career, whether you want to be working for another designer or start your own business or both. We can work on your resume, your portfolio, and there's 12 modules to kind of get you educated on what to expect from the career. So check that out. Links are in the show notes. Let's talk about questions you should be asking your clients now. You're now listening to Design Curious, a place where you, creative one, are here to learn about what it really is like to be an interior designer. And I'm your host and mentor, Rebecca Ward. If you're worried about how to succeed in a creative career, if you're ready to learn your next steps to become an interior designer, and if you want the satisfaction of doing something you love every day, you are in the right place. Grab a coffee, a notebook, and let's dig into today's episode. So I talked before back in episode 103 about the project management and how the first part in step 2, we gather information from the client. So we're gathering information at the initial consultation and then at a second meeting with the client where we're reviewing kind of the design direction of where we're going. And both of these meetings, there's some important questions that you're going to need to bring up to speak with your client about to make sure that you're really understanding what their needs are. Some of these questions you might ask on the discovery call with them as well, and it's good then to bring it up again later after they've had time to think about it again and review it and maybe discuss in more detail. It's always easier in person to kind of talk about things, and especially if you're in the space that's going to be remodeled. It's a little bit harder for new builds, but if you're in maybe their home where they're living now, you can kind of get a good sense of how they live and what frustrates them, what their needs are and everything. So I'm going to go through today some of the questions you might want to bring up with these clients as you're going through this consultation with them. And you can kind of see why our consultations take 2 hours sometimes, because we are asking a lot of questions. And as you're asking these questions, using your observation skills to read the client and see when they might be holding back or when you need to ask more questions about what you're talking about, and really taking a look at how they dress and how they've furnished and decorated their existing space, and look for ways that you might be able to push the envelope a little bit, maybe push them out of their comfort zone, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You don't always want to push them out of their comfort zone, but oftentimes people don't know what they don't know. And so they might not have thought about making a custom dining table to suit their family of 9 or whatever it is, So just really have all of your listening ears on and all of your senses attuned to the client during this 2-hour meeting. So let's go through some of the questions you might be asking. First of all, you want to find out if this home that they're living in or they're remodeling or building is going to be a forever home, or if they're only planning to stay in it for a couple more years, because there's going to be different ways that you design those two answers to the question. If it's a forever home, you definitely want to tailor it and customize it so that it meets that client's specific needs, because they're not thinking about someone else coming in and buying it. If they're like a couple that's over 6 feet tall, you might want to have taller counters, and they don't necessarily care that other people might not be able to use those counters because they're so tall. This is their house and they want to live in it appropriately. So Those are the kind of things you're going to think about when you are talking about a forever home. Very custom details. You don't care about what trends are happening in the buyer's market, what buyers might be looking for, because nobody's buying this house. This is the client's house. And if they love orange everywhere, then they can have orange everywhere in a tasteful, designer-y way. But if they're selling soon, they're like, well, we just need it to be a little bit better, but we are probably going to move in about 5 years. Then that's when I kind of pull back on the more specific tailoring and customization and say, well, since you do want to be able to sell the house quickly and for a great price, you kind of want to meet the market where buyers are looking to find certain level of colors and finishes in their home. Like more recently, a lot of people have been wanting white kitchens. And so we might kind of design towards a white kitchen if that's what the general market is looking for when you go to sell a house. So those are important questions to get out of the way up top so you can understand what level of customization you're doing. Then we often will walk through with the client through the house and ask them to tell us what they like and what they don't like about their house. And if there's any stressful areas that are really, they cannot handle it anymore. And that's why you're there, because this mudroom or this laundry room is like so inefficient and they're tripping over everything all the time. They just had to get someone out there to remodel it. So you want to identify those critical places and definitely understand all of their pain points of why you're there to help design a new space. Because if they're walking by that laundry room every day that is inefficient, ineffective, they're not wanting to go in there. They're not wanting to do their laundry. It's piling up. It's a cause of stress. Subconsciously, if they even glance in that direction, their stress level goes up. So we don't want that for them. We want to be able to alleviate stress. They want the home to be a retreat and relaxing place. Then you want to find out what their lifestyle is like. So are they big entertainers or are they homebodies and kind of looking to be more reclusive when they get home? If they're entertainers, they are probably going to want their spaces that they entertain in to be the priority for the remodel first. If you can't do everything at once, then you're going to want to focus on that entryway, the powder room, the living room, maybe dining and kitchen if it's an open concept, so that when they have their guests and if they just live for being the best host and hostess, they want their guests to feel comfortable, not be looking at any deficiencies or flaws that are in the house, and want it to flow just smoothly and perfectly so that the guests can enjoy their time while they're in the home. And so we'll focus first on those spaces as opposed to maybe the back end of the house, because entertaining is such a high priority for them. Well, if they, on the flip side, are never entertaining and they work all the time and then they just want to come home and relax and unwind, we might focus a little more on places that help them to recover. So it might be their primary suite, or it could be the kitchen or the family room where they're relaxing, watching TV, spending time with their family. And so it's understanding where those priorities are. So those are definitely good questions to ask your client at the consultation. Then we're going to look at more of the decorative or style things. Well, I have a style quiz on my website that people can go and check out, find out what their design style is. I also have a version of it that is visual that I bring to my consultations, and we kind of go over it again. So even if they took the quiz on my website and said that they're transitional, I want to make sure that we are speaking the same language. So I have this visual quiz that we walk through, looking at the 12 styles, then talking about those images specifically, what they like and don't like in those images. Then if they are transitional, we'll pull up the transitional inspiration board and kind of look at, maybe 20 or 30 images that are all transitional to make sure that is what they're looking for in style. I feel it's very important to identify style in this initial meeting so that when my wheels start turning for design ideas, I'm designing in the correct style for the client. You might have walked into the house thinking that, they're more traditional because the house is so Tuscan or something like that, but maybe they love mid-century modern. So you're not going to want to make that assumption based on the architecture of the house. You want to definitely get to know the client's taste and whether we need to eliminate some of those more traditional elements in order to make it more modern. So you'll also ask them what their favorite colors are. Color, as we've talked before, it can be very triggering for people. So you want to know if they hate orange or if they love orange or if they want only cool colors or if they want everything vibrant and why they want those colors too. Like if they are just looking to have more energy and be more energized in their home, color can be a part of it, but there might be other elements that you want to bring in as well. On the flip side, identifying colors that they hate so that you're not bringing in red if they really are opposed to red. And a lot of times people have memory associations with certain colors or patterns, like floral patterns, or we talked about wallpaper before. Like a lot of people think of grandma's wallpaper is not the same kind of wallpaper we're using today. So I like to use a lot of visuals in these consultations to make sure everybody's on the same page when we're talking about our terms. We also need to know who is going to be the decision maker in this project, because you might be meeting with one spouse of the couple who is the person who has the most time to meet with you, but that might not be the person who is making the final decisions or paying the bills. And if they don't have authority to say yes and no on your design decisions, then the person who is supposed to make those decisions, or if they always do it together, then you need to have both people there at the consultation so that you can get a proper sense of what they are going to be saying yes to and no to. Some people have a hard time making decisions for themselves, and they need to ask a whole village before they can say yes to your proposal. So you need to know that going in as the designer, if this is going to be designed by committee or if you can coach your client into being confident to say yes to your designs, because you're really designed for them. You're not designed for everyone else who's not living in the house. They don't need to ask their mother-in-law and their neighbor down the street. This is for them. And you might have to do a little bit of coaching and hand-holding to help them to understand this is their house. You're designing for them. They deserve to say yes and no to things that they like. So you might run into those clients I have before. You will also have clients on the flip side that make decisions very quickly. They know exactly what they like and what they don't like. That's always a lot of fun to work with as well, because you can get to a design decision and implementation very quickly. They'll say, yes, no, I like it. Let's move forward. Here's the check. Let's go. So that's always kind of fun too. And then, of course, we want to talk about budgets, what their hopeful budgets are, what our estimated projects like theirs costing, if that's a good price that they're willing to work with. You can reference the budget guides and furniture pricing guides that I've talked about before in the show notes. We'll have links to those episodes. So you can have an idea before you're presenting it to or talking with the client in the consultation of how much average projects can cost. I always like to ask, too, where they have bought their furniture from in the past. If they've only ever bought furniture from IKEA, then they might not understand how much it's going to cost to invest in their furniture that they want to last a long time. Or maybe they have bought from a designer before or worked with a designer before, because that will definitely help you in your process of getting them to say yes to the things you're proposing, because they're like, yes, I'm familiar with this process and how much things cost, and this is good to me. And then also talking about timeline, just making sure it's realistic. And you always also want to ask the question on how they got to hear about you. If they were a referral from a friend, you might have a chat about that friend or the project that you worked on and things that they liked about it. And then you kind of just want to ask them to tell you any questions that they have. Like, do you have any questions for me before we start this process? Like, a lot of the questions will get answered because I'm walking through the contract with them on our project starter consultations. I read the contract with them line by line so that it explains our process to the T, basically, what they can expect. And I want to make sure that they are reading that. Oftentimes, if you just send the contract to them to sign, they will skim it and not really understand the details of how you work in there. And then they're asking questions later and like, well, this was in the contract and you agreed to it. So I would definitely recommend reading through the contract. And as I'm reading through the contract, there's always places where I stop to embellish or explain further what I'm saying in the contract. Or I might ask them specific questions like, do you have a contractor that you're working with? Because I'm talking about them contracting or signing a contract with the contractor directly. As I'm not a general contractor, I cannot hire in the state of California a general contractor on their behalf. So then I'll say, do you have a contractor you've worked with before, or would you like us to pair you with one that we've worked with? So as you're walking through the contract, it really helps to bring up any additional questions they might have. And usually by the time we get through that contract, we are good to go. They're like, no, you've answered all my questions. I don't have any other questions. Then they'll just wait for the contract to come with the project scope and the retainer, and then we'll be ready to go. So that is kind of the questions that I ask clients in the consultation. Hopefully that is helpful to kind of get a good understanding of what you should be talking about and looking for when you're having your initial consultation. So like I said, there's a lot of things you need to be asking your clients. We get great feedback from our clients as far as feeling like they are listened to, that we really take in, digest, and understand their needs. And we have taken the time to help them to identify what their design style is. And by the time we deliver it to them, they are just so pleased with the results. And so I want your clients to feel that way about your design process as well. So if you are asking all of these questions, then you should be able to have all the information you need to accurately execute a great design for your clients. Don't forget, if you want more information about the career of interior design, I've got some great downloads for you in the show notes, as well as a quiz, more information about my design mentor. So check all that out. Next week, I'll have another great episode for you. And until then, stay creative. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode, please leave a rating and a review. This helps me reach other curious creatives like you. If you have a topic request or would like to contact me, simply head over to my website, rwarddesign.com, or email me at podcast@rwarddesign.com.